Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 Chevy Spark, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system. We're going to do that in conjunction with the Roadmaster custom fit stoplight switch kit. Before we jump right in, I do want to touch base on the main parts that you're going to need to flat tow your Spark down the road in the first place. And there's going to be a total of 5 of them. You'll have your base plate, your tow bar, your safety cables, your tow bar wiring, and your supplemental braking system. And since the Spark does require the battery to be disconnected when you're flat towing, I also like to recommend the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect switch. With all that said though, when it comes to picking out a supplemental braking system, it's a pretty important decision. You know, it's a big investment, so you want something that's going to work well with your vehicle. And what a braking system is even going to do to begin with is apply the brakes in your Spark whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, and that's going to help bring you to a more complete and safe stop, you know, shortening that distance. You're not relying on just a coach to do all the braking. And not to mention too, pretty much all the states now require one of these systems by law, so definitely want to stay on the safe side and abide by that. But there's a couple of systems that I usually recommend a lot of the time. They're both made by Demco. You got the Air Force One and the Stay and Play Duo, which would work fine on the Spark, but honestly, I feel like the InvisiBrake is actually a really good matchup or a good fit for this particular vehicle, really for a couple of different reasons. One of them being that the InvisiBrake has more of a fixed amount of braking pressure, right? So it don't matter if you slam the brakes on your coach or barely hit them, that same amount of pressure is going to be sent to the unit back here and apply the Chevy's brakes the same over and over again, right? And on a vehicle this small, I'd probably almost prefer that, right? Instead of having it match the pressures to the coach, I just feel like it would almost work a little bit better, to be honest with you. And more importantly, I think with a lot of the Sparks that have manual transmissions, ours does, and the assembly that the InvisiBrake uses to connect to the brake pedal arm is very small and does not take up a whole lot of room. And so it makes sense when it's already kind of clustered under there with 3 pedals, you know, not having a big cylinder mechanism like those Demco units have definitely makes the car easier to drive when you're not flat towing it. One of the things I do like with this kit that comes standard as to where a lot of the other braking systems, this is something you'll need to pick up separately, is we have an indicator light that goes inside of our motorhome. And what that's going to do whenever the brake pedal is applied in our towed vehicle, that light will illuminate red, letting us know that the system is operating correctly back in our Chevy. One of the benefits to the InvisiBrake system as well is the fact that it's compatible with all different types of motorhomes. You know, if you happen to have motorhomes with air brakes like we do, it'll work with those. If you have maybe a smaller coach with regular hydraulic brakes, it'll work with those as well. So really versatile system as far as that goes, and that's not always the case with certain types of braking systems. A lot of them only work with hydraulic or only work with air brakes and things like that. The InvisiBrake also has a safety device here, which is called the breakaway switch. And what this is for, in the event of an unlikely disconnect, what would happen is the pin would get pulled out, applying the brakes in the Spark, helping to kind of slow things down and get everything back under control. One of the things I do wish could be improved upon is the size of the overall operating unit and the locations on where you can mount it. So with the InvisiBrake, you do have to mount it inside of the vehicle, which does take up quite a bit of space. It's a relatively large unit. And then you'll have to route more wires and stuff inside to get all hooked up. Not really a huge deal on the Spark, considering, you know, the back seat, you don't really have a ton of room to work with anyway and put extra people or items, but it would be convenient if you could maybe mount this under the hood or if it was even smaller, just take up a little bit less floor space. At the very beginning, I mentioned that we're going to install this in conjunction with that stoplight switch kit. And what that stoplight switch will be used for is to send a signal out to that indicator light that we had up on the dashboard in the motorhome, and that tells that light when the pedal is actually being pulled down. So I definitely recommend to pick one of those up as well with this kit if you do plan on using it. It's a great fit for the Spark, at least in my opinion. Real simple system and reliable too. It's been around for a long time, so really can't go wrong there. As far as the installation goes, definitely involved. A lot of wires to run and things to set up and everything. You do it one time though, system's ready to be used from then on out. With that said, if this is something you don't want to mess with, definitely understand that. You can always use a dealer locator network, and that can help you find a shop in your neighborhood that can do it for you. But if you're going to do it yourself, hang around, we'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation for our InvisiBrake system, we need to first start by mounting up some of our major components, one of them being the breakaway switch, which is this part here. Really straightforward. Our base plate had a bracket to allow us to mount up our breakaway switch, and depending on your base plate, pretty much all about the same. You can just use the supplied nut and bolt that they give you to secure this to the front. We can route some of our wiring now. So in the kit, you'll have a bundle of wire, and one of the ends is going to look like this. All right, that's going to connect to our breakaway switch. And then as far as the indicator light goes, inside of your motorhome, they give you a bunch of really nice wiring with ends already attached to it that you can use. But the issue is with that you have to run it completely the length of the motorhome, so on and so forth. We have a better solution to that. Simpler and gives us a cleaner install look. So that's what this black wire is. You could always cut one of the bundles that they give you and use it. That's exactly what I did. So we have these two ends, just dropped them down through the engine compartment, and these are just going to get routed over to here. So this wire, that's eventually going to get hooked up to our 6-way round connector plug. In order to do that, we'll have to put the fascia back on first, just how this base plate's set up, but it's good to have it routed at the very least. And then this one for our breakaway switch, that just plugs directly into the end on it. Like I said, I was able to get our fascia all put back on and everything, and our 6-way connector plug where I have my tow bar wiring hooked up to, this is where we're going to hook up that wire for our indicator light. And I'm going to use this terminal here. We'll back out that set screw, and we can take this wire, we'll strip the insulation back some, give it a good twist. So more or less doing it this way, as opposed to having an individual wire that we need to hook up. Doing it this way, it's going to keep it all closed in on the wiring that plugs into here. It's just one less thing to worry about. So that'll get pushed into the terminal, tighten on the set screw. And one thing I like to do at the very end, once we know everything is working, I'll come back with some RTV silicone and seal all this up just to help prevent corrosion and things like that. As far as where that little black wire and the breakaway switch wire goes, that's going to go inside of our vehicle through a grommet. All right, it's really tricky to see, but back in there's a factory grommet. I cut a hole in it and poked the black wire through it and the connector end for the breakaway switch wiring through it. And on that breakaway switch wiring, you'll have another part that kind of breaks off and turns into this. These you want to leave in the engine compartment because we're going to hook these up to power eventually. You'll have two more things that you actually have to run through the firewall as well. One of them is a bundle of wire that comes in the kit. It has the green, yellow, brown, and white. So I use that same grommet to get that from the outside in. And you're also going to have a length of nylon air tube. Same deal with it. Since we're right here, might as well kind of start hooking some of the stuff up. We'll start with our nylon air tube. That's going to have to tee into our vehicle's brake booster vacuum system. So this is going to be the line that we're dealing with. I'm going to disconnect it just to make it easier to work with. And how you do that, on each side of this, there's a little push button there. All right, you squeeze both those in. You're able to pull this off and just see what's going on a lot better. If you grab the end of your nylon air tube and then grab one of these smaller hoses that comes in the kit, you can put the hose on the tube. I put a little soap water on the end here, so be careful not to actually get it inside of the tube. And with these, if you kind of work the end of it, it makes it easier to kind of slide on. Get it into position. So I'm about 1.5 inches on there probably, and that'll be enough as long as it, is all sealed up and everything. And what we're going to do here, I'm going to cut this right about there. And then we can take this check valve, and the black side of it is going to face towards the engine. There is a little arrow on there pointing. That's what you want to point towards the engine. Might be kind of tricky to see, but just for reference. I'll plug that into there. And this end will plug back onto the other side. And about right here, we'll make another cut. We'll just get this foam off there. Or worked back a little bit at least. And for this, you can take this T-fitting, work that into the end of the hose. What I'll probably do here, because I think it'll be easier, is kind of get this positioned. I'm going to want this, so I think that should work out pretty well. Push that end over this here. This end will just get pushed onto here. And then I actually kind of did on accident there, but the way you'd rehook this back up is you just simply push back down onto the fitting it came off of, and it'll snap into place. Start to get some of our wiring hooked up. So here I have the brown, yellow, green, and white wire from the InvisiBrake harness that we ran inside. The white wire I crimped on a ring terminal because that's going to be a ground. And the brown, yellow, and green wires are going to tie into our existing diode or tow bar wiring. So I got these ends prepped, and how we're going to make these connections will be the same for all of our electronics, whether it be a butt connector, ring terminal, spade terminal, what have you. So these are just going to go color for color here. So I'll take the green ends, I'll twist them together nice and tight. I'll take a butt connector, put it over both ends and crimp it down. I've opted to upgrade to these heat shrink styles because the ends seal up, help protect against corrosion a little bit better. Ones that come in the kit will work fine, just tape them up real good. However, usually when you're doing these type installs anyway, you find yourself needing extra butt connectors, so you can always pick a pack of these up if you want. And we'll just take the other end of our existing tow bar wiring, crimp it down, and I'll just do the same thing here for our remaining wires until we get them all hooked up. Once you have those connections made, if you are using these heat shrink style connectors, you just come back with a heat gun and seal up the ends. That white wire that we put the ring terminal on, that ties into the ground circuit from your existing diode wiring, and I happen to have mine grounded right here on this factory ground. So I removed the bolt with a 10mm, put the bolt through the ring terminal and tighten it back down. If your diodes aren't grounded in a manner this way here in the engine compartment, you could simply just tie them, tie that white wire into the white wire on your existing diodes, just like we did the green, yellow, and brown one. For the black and red wire in our kit, the black one you can strip back, crimp on a ring terminal, and attach that to battery ground in the negative post. The red wire, you strip back and crimp on the included fuse holder here. Ring terminal on this end, and that'll go to the positive battery post. And with this too, do not install the fuse just yet. We don't want anything to have power until everything's completely hooked up. So we'll do that at the very end. Moving inside now, I took our wiring that we ran in here. So we got the green, yellow, brown, white, the black and red power wire, our airline tube, and the wire here from our breakaway switch. And I just kind of popped this little plastic piece off, just lifts out of place, and started to peel our carpet up. And this wire, I have it running like this underneath the front seat towards the back of the vehicle. And that's because we're going to put our main operating unit underneath of our front seat. One thing to note too, I took the other bundle of this very small diameter airline tubing, and starting about right here, I taped it to our harness and also routed this in that same path. Underneath of our front seat, I just took a razor and put a little slice in the carpet there and pass all of our tubing and wiring through. And we can start to hook it up to the back side of our main operating unit here. So it's pretty straightforward. What goes where? This one will plug into that opening. This one will go right there. And then this little fitting, you can take the other piece of little tubing that they give you and push that on. And our airline is going to get plugged into that. I'm going to cut it to length though, so we don't have so much to work with. So push that in. And then for this, that's where this little tubing is going to get plugged into. And when you cut this, if you can, use a tool like this, or just use a utility knife and a block of wood. And you want a good, clean, straight cut. If you use a regular pair of snips, it might kink it. And that's a quick connect type fitting, so it'll just push into place. You'll feel it kind of lock in, and that's all there is to it there. I went ahead and secured this to the floor, and what I did was just poke a hole in the carpet and just use a zip tie on each side. It's held in place. It's easy to remove if you ever need to service anything or move anything around. You cut the zip tie and you're done, and prevents us from having to run screws down through the floor. What you're able to do now is mount up this cylinder here. And I just tucked it in this corner as far forward as I can. And they give you a little clamp here. You can clamp it down to keep it secure. And on the back side, I just put some foam tape on it, just so it, you know, if it does move a little bit, it's not metal on metal, just to help keep things quiet, not a huge deal. And then that real thin black airline tube, I cut that clean, and that just plugs right into the fitting the same way it did on the InvisiBrake operating unit. And with this, you're going to have a cable that comes out of there, and I got that running over here. The cable just kind of comes around. You want to make sure that you don't have any real tight bends in it or anything like that. You know, long sweeping ones are fine. But it runs up to here, where we can set up our pulley system. And so what you want to do first, they give you the bracket that clamps on the brake pedal arm. I position mine like this, and you want a good straight shot coming off of the pulley. Right, that way it has good leverage and everything. So I mounted up our pulley right here. They give you the self-tapping screws and everything that you need to secure it. Make sure you got it at the appropriate angle. On this vehicle, you really don't have too many options. So this is what I found to be the best positioning here. And then, you know, to keep this end secure, they give you a little bracket put down. So self-tapping screws there. And if you want, you know, like around here, I just put some silicone around them just to help keep everything sealed. And that's really all there is to it there. You will need to make sure that the tension is adjusted properly. And what I mean by that, when the brake pedal's in the natural resting position, you're going to be able to take the cable, and if you pull it, this little ball on the end of it, you know, you want that to have some movement in it. You know, just pretty much the ball be able to come out of that little socket there. And to achieve that, you know, there's a couple of screws here, nuts here that you can turn to either pull this closer that way or closer towards you. Really, one of the only main things left to do for our InvisiBrake system is to hook up that wire that we ran to our 6-way in the front for our indicator light. And in order to do that, we're going to have to first set up this stoplight switch, which is made by Roadmaster as well. But with this part, it's something you will need to pick up separately. Let's go ahead and do that now. I like to try to wire as much as I can, you know, just sitting in this seat as opposed to under the dash. Just makes everything a lot easier to get to. So on one of these ends, crimp on a butt connector. So we'll strip that back. Pretty thin wire, so be careful. But twist it up tight, and I like to kind of double them over there to give the butt connector something more to grab onto. Get that crimped on there. And then on one of the ends, doesn't matter which one, you can take the wire for your monitor light, your indicator light. That'll get crimped into one side. As far as the other side goes, the kit will come with a small bundle of red wire. And take that, crimp it in there. Just to touch base on how this works, because you will have to adjust it once it's mounted up and everything, and you can't hardly see what's going on. You have these nuts here that you can turn, which will push a switch closer to the brake pedal arm or pull it away from it. And what you're looking for, this little plunger here, whenever the brake pedal is just in its natural position, not getting pulled or pushed down, you want that plunger to be almost completely inside of the housing there inside of the switch. So if my finger's the brake pedal arm, it's in there. Once the brake starts to get pushed down, that plunger starts to come out, closing the switch and allowing current to flow through it. So that's how you're going to adjust this. Once that's the time to do so, we'll get this mounted up to our bracket. So this end is going to connect to a factory bolt under the dash. This is going to go through here. We have a couple of nuts, a star washer. Put that through, the star washer through. And I usually like to just kind of start this in the middle, you know, give you a bunch of adjustability and kind of work from there. When you do go to snug these down and adjust everything, this end will be a 17 millimeter and this one will be a 14 millimeter. As far as where we're going to mount the stoplight switch bracket underneath the dash, kind of by the steering column, there will be a factory stud with a 13 millimeter nut on it. I put some yellow marker on there just to make it a little bit more visible. But what you're going to do, remove that nut, take the bracket in, slide it over the stud, and reinstall the nut to keep everything secure. I got that switch mounted up, and it's definitely a little tight, but here's how everything turned out. With the switch mounted up and everything, that leaves us with one more wire to hook up, the red one that we attach to the switch. That's going to need to be a power wire, and what you can actually do, the red wire for our InvisiBrake system, with that being the power supply, it's fused and everything, you can simply just tie into that. So I cut the red wire in half, doubled up the red one from our switch into the butt connector, and completed the circuit once again. At this point, you go ahead, put the fuse, place it into the fuse holder, wrap anything else up that you need to do as far as cleaning up the wires, things like that, and we can go ahead and move over to the motorhome side of things now. Inside of our coach, by the driver's side, we need to figure out a spot where we want to mount up our little indicator light here, and the little buzzer piece will get connected behind it, but you won't see this part. I'm going to do ours over here. It's relatively flat behind the panel. It's wide open. There's nothing behind it there. That's really what you want to look out for, is just to make sure that nothing of importance is behind here, because you will have to drill a small hole to allow you to pass this portion of the light through. That would be a good time too. The kit does come with a little sticker that you can put over this. It just says it's an indicator light. On our particular application though, we know what it's for. We don't need the big sticker there, so I'm gonna leave it off, but you can put it on if you want to. I kind of pre-built a little harness here. I just took a red wire and a white wire, maybe a couple foot long, and what I've done is the little buzzer, I stripped the ends back and tied the red wire from the buzzer into the extra red wire, white wire from the buzzer, extra white wire. My thought is it'll probably be easier if I can take this whole harness, come in from behind the dash, put it through the hole that we drilled, and then we can connect our indicator light and everything. It'll just be easier to work with. So I'll go ahead and push these wires through. Got these wires pushed up through here, and hooked up the indicator light to them like we talked about. Just use some butt connectors, and after looking at it too, the opening's pretty small, so I did kind of recut everything. I staggered my butt connectors to make them hopefully pass through the opening a little bit easier, and this light just snaps into place here. So we'll work everything into position. Push the light in. As far as where these wires get hooked up to, every motorhome is going to be a little bit different. The white wire, that'll be a ground, and the red wire, that has to get hooked up to the the wire that we hooked up to our stoplight switch, that indicator light wire, if you will. And so like I said, when we hooked up that black wire to the 6-way at the front of our vehicle. We're able to utilize our motorhome 7-way. That's because our coach happens to have a brake controller plug under the dash. And so I was able to ground the white wire to it and then use the trailer brake controller wire that runs all the way back to the 7-way and hook up the red indicator light wire to it. So doing it this way avoids having to take that huge bundle of wire that they give you and route it from here all the way to the back and use the little jumper that goes in between there and everything else. A lot of coaches are going to have a brake controller plug. For example, we have a Tiffin today. A lot of the Tiffins will have them up in this area. Sometimes they're in kind of wonky spots. You have to look around. Know for a fact a lot of the F53 chassis coaches have them. It's really just going to depend on your particular situation. Got all of our wires cleaned up under the dash, and all that's left to do now is hook up to our vehicle, hit the brakes, make sure everything's working properly, set the pressure to a good starting point on the main operating unit. Roadmaster suggests about 60 psi, and go from there. But with all that said, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on our 2020 Chevrolet Spark.